What's up, guys? Barbecue here with the last Kobold Undercity class tier list. This one is going to be for Hibernia. So this will tell you the good, mediocre, and bad classes to roll for the fresh Season 3 launch if you plan on farming Kobold Undercity. I do want to give a shout out to my buddy Connor on Discord who did help me construct this tier list, so let's get into it. Okay, right off the bat we have Enchanter. Enchanter is a solid A tier. This is going to be your heat debuffer for the group. So if you're going to be running a Mentalist or a Valewalker and you're going to want to ride the heat train, this is going to be your main debuffer. Alternatively, you can skip debuffers altogether and just have your main tank run a legendary for that damage type. It is going to be like 10% weaker on the value of the debuff, but it's a way to just slot something else in the group. But very good single target DPS. They have root if you need it. They also can spec bomb spec if you do a PBAE group, which is pretty strong in Hibernia. The bomb group just struggles with the last boss now. You used to be able to just stack all in one spot and just bomb through the entire boss, but unfortunately they fixed that mechanic, so you can't really do that anymore. But bomb group is still strong. They're just going to struggle with the last boss, which is Termina. Yeah, good, solid A tier there. Animist is going to be, let's see, Animist will put in B tier. Animist has really solid single target damage. They also have root. Root doesn't really go very far in the dungeon though. It's only for like panic situations pretty much. But they're missing the utility that an Eldritch or an Enchanter is going to bring to the group. So for that reason, they are going to be B tier. Bard. Bard, I think, honestly, is trashed here. I think Bard is like D, honestly. They bring backup heals, and they bring base buffs, and they bring CC. That's pretty much all they bring. Compare it to something like a Mentalist who does all that and can do damage. Yeah, it's just kind of a dead slot. I guess you could bring them for backup heals, or if you don't have any other support, you could bring a Bard. But there's really no reason to bring one over a Warden or a Druid. The only time a Bard is going to shine is when you wipe and you have speed to get back to the boss. So for that reason alone, not for that reason alone, for those multiple reasons, they're going in D tier. Champ. Champ is a very solid A tier. The reason they're in A tier is because they are not, if we're comparing them to tanks, they're not as good as Hero. And if we're comparing it to DPS, it's not as good as a Valewalker. So I can't really slot them in the same tier as those two. For that reason, they're going to be in A tier. Very strong debuffs. The haste debuff and the strength con debuff actually help a lot in dungeons like this. I know it's hard to tell sometimes because you don't really see like the direct benefit of it, but it is very helpful. Super solid A tier. They can tank the dungeon, no problem if they want to. Obviously, they're not going to be as durable as like a hero. But just like I can tank the dungeon on a Reaver, a champ shouldn't have an issue tanking the dungeon. As long as you spec your RAs for defense, you'll be fine. Druid is A tier. It's got your specs. It's got root if you need it in a backup pinch. It's got great heals. The reason it is an A tier, though, is because there is actually a better support to bring to KU if you're on Hib's side. But a Druid, you can never go wrong with, especially season launch. They're going to be everywhere. So if you see one looking for group, just take it. It's going to be a great A tier class for you. Eldritch is going into A tier. Just like the Enchanter, the Eldritch is going to be your debuffer. Also can do PBAE if you do a bomb group setup, so that is very strong. It does have disease and near sight. Not quite sure how much that's going to help you in the dungeon, but it is an option. It does have a short duration AoE mez, which can be helpful for certain ads. There are some ads in the dungeon that you want to stick like a single target duration mez on, but there are some ads that you can just get away with AoE mezzing that they're only going to be CC'd for a few seconds anyways. So, Eldritch is very good at that if they need to. Valewalker is S tier. They basically have an S tier kit in all aspects of Dark Age of Camelot. They do huge damage. You're going to be hitting anywhere from 600 to over 1,000 without a crit. Grasping Roots is really good for keeping adds in place, like the Terminus snakes. If they get overwhelmed, you can grasp them all in place, and it'll give your person who's using the flute more time to figure it out. You can use a Heat Legendary to debuff for the Grasping Roots follow-up. And then also, if you're like running the Light or Mentalism Spec Menta, they both have heat damage, so you can ride that trade together. But a really good group comp nowadays is honestly just running 3 Valewalkers, or like 2 Valewalkers and a champ. And then you're basically set. You can't go wrong with just the humongous damage. And once again, you can check the description. I'll put a few cookie cutter compositions in there for you. But Valewalker, obvious S tier, super good class. Warden is also an S tier. So Warden actually is better than a Druid for the fact that they have the same heals and the same base buffs, but they also bring Celerity, PBT, and they can also guard as well. And then a group disease on top. So as long as you can charge your specs, a Warden is definitely going to be better to bring in there for you. Easy S tier class, just so much utility, and it all works in KU. So super, super good class. Nightshade I'm going to put into C tier. You basically have to forego stealth altogether and just spec 50 CD, 50 weapon. You can bring some utility with your poisons. Their damage is decent, but obviously you're going to be outshined by a Blademaster, a Valewalker, a Champ. They're all just going to do way more damage than you in there. Another thing to consider is how often someone who's leading a group is going to invite you on the class you're on, and Nightshade is just, let's be honest, never going to get an invite, basically. So that puts it into C tier. You could try to form a group as a Nightshade, but like I've said before, if I saw Nightshade advertising for a group, I don't know if I would ever join it, just to be honest with you. So they're going to sit very comfortably in C tier. Blademaster is an easy A tier, just like the Merc on Alb or the Zerk on mid. Straightforward DPS. You don't really need... Slam did get nerfed to 5 seconds. You don't really need a second slammer for Hib if you have someone who can just do a baseline stun for you. So they can just focus on DPS at that point. No downtime due to power issues. Really good at season launch. I normally argue that melees are more gear dependent than casters, but Blademaster's damage is just so cracked no matter what that I think they're gonna rock in there. So they're a very nice A tier. Bainshee is B tier. Decent single target damage. They can demez, which is valuable, although you really shouldn't need much demezing in there if you're doing all the mechanics correctly. They can root, which is another, you shouldn't really need much in there. They do body damage, so it is harder to debuff for. You would need to bring a Void Eldritch for you as your debuffer, or once again, you can just use a body legendary on the tank. But other than that, they don't really bring any more utility than I mentioned, so they sit in B tier. Hero is S tier. Just the main tank has everything you need. Their survivability is off the charts. You can Moose in a panic. You can IP in a panic. That's basically 3 full health bars right there. You pretty much always want to be using a legendary as your main hand, unless you're like, I don't know, you got a double debuff weapon or something cheeky. But I would just debuff, use a legendary and debuff for whatever your DPS is doing. But there's no better tank in KU on Hib than the Hero. Just super durable. Very, very good. Ranger, I'm gonna go in C tier again. Just like the 2 archers from the other realms, I've never seen a ranger in KU, probably for good reason. People like to theory craft and say they can do a lot of damage, but I've literally never seen one in there, so it's hard to really judge on where they go. Once again, position on the tier list, you kind of have to relate to the group ability, and I don't think anyone's going to group a ranger unless they're super, super desperate for like a 3rd DPS. But other than straightforward damage, they're bringing 0 utility to the group, so just understand that. Mentalist is S tier. Mentalist, it has... The list on what Mentalist doesn't have is a lot shorter than the list it does have. So they can demez, they can mez, they have secondary heals, they have great damage, they have everything you need. It's basically a bard, but can also do damage. Like, think of the Sork from Owl. It does your CC and your damage both. So rather than running a bard and a DPS and wasting 2 slots, you just run the Mentalist and it covers both the slots right there. All the tools, just utility is off the charts. So that puts it in S tier. And that's going to round out the Hibernia class tier list right here. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments below. Once again, we have 0 testing on Vampire, so there is no Vampire on the tier list. But when we do get some information on Vampire, I'll probably put an annotation or something in the video on where I think it lands. But until then, there's no info on it. So thank you once again for watching, and hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Bye.